Hello and welcome to VGC. I'm Jordan Midler, and today we are joined by Dring from GamesIndustry.biz to talk about one of the biggest stories in recent times. But considering the way games are going these days, tomorrow Nintendo might have bought Rockstar. Chris, how are you doing?
Right, how are you? That would be something, wouldn't it?
For those unaware, PlayStation are in the process of acquiring Bungie, the team behind Destiny and at one point Halo. So people are thinking that this is a response to Microsoft acquiring Activision, not realizing that these things don't happen as quickly as just phoning up Bungie and saying, "Are you willing to be bought?" So can you speak to how this kind of deal came about? Obviously, apart from say Jim Ryan, you're one of the most knowledgeable people in the world about this situation now. So talk to us about how it came together.
Well, it's well, interestingly, Microsoft have been buying IP. I mean, they've been buying studios and talent as well, but they've been buying games. And PlayStation actually haven't been buying that many games. They've been buying people and talent and studios, like Insomniac and Fire Sprite and Housemarque. Bungie's sort of in that line, although they do have an IP in Destiny. But the deal was from the before lockdown. Pete Parsons and Jim Ryan were talking about just potentially, how their visions are aligned. And then about 5 6 months ago, I guess was industry consolidation. And they say it's nothing to do with the consolidation, but I mean, I think has something to do with the pricings people are paying at the minute. They started talking again about the prospect of working together. PlayStation are it's I don't know how well documented it is. They've talked about it relatively openly, but they're trying to move into live service games. They've made online multiplayer games in the past, like Warhawk. I remember testing Warhawk in my first jobs, and PlayStation Home, obviously Metaverse before Metaverse was a thing. But over the last generation, they haven't really done anything in that space. They really are pushing back into that, and that is why Bungie fits with them. That's why they've identified Bungie. It's not the same reasons why Microsoft is buying Activision Blizzard, and it's not the reason Sony may want to react to that. This isn't a reaction to that.
And do you get the impression that from the Bungie side that they were talking to multiple companies? Because there's been sort of whispers since this came out that they were potentially talking to Microsoft at one point. We know Phil Spencer is a big fan of Destiny. Do you know how they landed with PlayStation? Was it just the right offer?
It's interesting. I think there's a couple of things going on here because all companies are up for grabs at the minute. Right, we can make that absolutely clear. And Bungie's an independent studio. They're probably the biggest independent games developer out that was still available. There are still a couple of others, but there aren't many. AAA game developers anyway. There's lots of independent ones. So I suspect lots of people were, asking if they can acquire. One of Bungie's objectives is to turn its IP, and by that I assume it means Destiny, but possibly games working on before, into a wider reaching franchises outside of just games. So I assume they're talking books, they're talking TV shows, they're talking films. That's something Sony can offer in a way that actually no other company really can, because Sony has its pictures division. An Uncharted movie is launching. I don't know if it's this week. It's imminently. There's a Last of Us TV show. PlayStation has the ability to do that, and that's something that appealed clearly to Bungie. The price is also a lot of money. I don't know if Sony outbid Microsoft. I can't imagine that being the case, but I suspect there's a few synergies here. Destiny is Bungie's a live service company working now for a company that doesn't make many live service games, so it has that sort of unique fit. And then you've got PlayStation's technical capabilities and their connection with the movie world, which I suspect has appealed to the Bungie senior management.
Have they spoken to what they intend to do with Bungie going forward? I know they've been paying some lip service to the idea that they're not going to take Destiny off of other platforms, at least straight away. But you get the impression that there might potentially be a bit of a cold war between Call of Duty and Destiny, wherein if PlayStation keeps Call of Duty, Xbox keeps Destiny?
I don't think that's going to happen either side. I think when it comes to live service games, your community is the most important thing. You've got these groups of gamers that play together. They've got friends together. That word of mouth is more powerful than any actual marketing. You take Call of Duty off PlayStation, you lose 60% of your console audience. You take Destiny off Xbox, you lose, I don't know what percentage it is, but you lose a large percentage of players. That's not something either company will want to do. And I don't think it's good for the brand. And I don't think it's good for even for their own strategies, even for their own platform strategies. Jim Ryan was quite explicit in my chat with him. He said it several times. Destiny is not coming off any other platform. I asked him if that meant consoles as well. He said yes, it means consoles as well. Then Pete Parsons chimed in and said it might even, and it might even be more platforms in the future, like suggesting that it might even come to another device, maybe a Nintendo device. I don't know. He didn't say that. He just I'm reading between the lines. But it was very clear that isn't the case, and for future Bungie games as well. Bungie's independent. If they make games, live service online multiplayer games, and in order to be successful in that space, you kind of need to be on as many platforms as you can, and that will include Microsoft's ones.
Interesting. And do you think that obviously the as you mentioned, the approaches to acquisitions have been slightly different? Microsoft are going for this big kind of widespread filling up of their first party, which is something that they were criticized for in the last generation. They didn't have any first party games apart from the ones they've had since like the 360. PlayStation seems much more targeted in their approach. They picked up things like Bluepoint and Housemarque, these teams that they've worked with for years and years. Do you see another big swing from PlayStation coming, specifically a Japanese developer? Because the Square has been floated a lot. They obviously have a good relationship. What do you think of that kind of thing?
I think buying a Japanese company isn't easy. I mean, I think you have to. I mean, Sony is a Japanese company, so that gives it a little bit more of an advantage over Microsoft or any other Western developer. There's a cultural difference there. I do think PlayStation, well, actually, Jim Ryan even said in the interview I did with him, he was very explicit. Yes, there will be some acquisitions. Whether or not we're talking Activision Blizzard size, or whether we're talking the sort of smaller acquisitions like they made last year, who can say? But I think PlayStation are going to feel they have to respond. They are also, they're all more reticent around the subscriptions model, but if that is the direction of travel, they'll have to go in that direction. They may want more IP. They have a lot themselves. Obviously, PlayStation, you said it there. PlayStation's in a different spot to Xbox. Xbox's first party business went backwards during Xbox One. I don't think that's an unfair thing to say. Some of its big franchises, Halo and Gears of War, declined over the last generation. There were successes. Ori was successes. Forza Horizon, Sea of Thieves. I'm not saying it was all true across the board, but it wasn't a great generation for Xbox's internal studios. On PlayStation side, it was the opposite. It was probably their best. It was easily their best generation they've ever had in terms of first party games. Xbox is investing a lot to change that, and they are already heading very well in the other direction now. So they're in different spots, but PlayStation want to respond. They want to maintain their position ahead of Microsoft, and they've got global reach in a way that Xbox currently doesn't, and they'll continue to invest in that. But I do expect PlayStation will be making some bigger swings in that space, but it will be different, I think, because Bungie feels more like buying. Because it's worth noting, Bungie isn't just a developer of games; they're a publisher. They publish their own games. And Sony have acquired the ability to now do live service games. PlayStation could do it to a degree before, but now they really can. Data analytics, community management, customer feedback, all the things that really complicated that it will need to do, because Naughty Dog's working on a live service game. They will partner with a number of studios last year. They're publishing the games from Deviation, from Firewalk. There's two Fire Studios. It's confusing. There is and Haven Studios. I think all three are working on a live service game of some description. There's probably about 5 or 6 coming out of PlayStation in the next generation. And having a company like Bungie allows them to do that. That's a very different reason to acquire a company like Bungie than it is, say, at Microsoft, why they acquired Activision Blizzard.
And just speaking to that point about live service games, obviously there's a lot of talk about a potential incoming Game Pass like to PlayStation, but obviously Jim Ryan has been very kind of dedicated to this idea of their £70 games that they spend hundreds of millions of dollars on staying as these big tentpoles, but they're going to want to fill that potential service with new things, so it doesn't feel like it's just all old stuff. Do you think that kind of speaks to their acquisition model? Because obviously if you're picking up studios, you can set them down kind of smaller scale titles that can still be new, but they're not going to put The Last of Us Part 3 on Spartacus or anything like that day one.
Yeah. Well, and it's also, I think that's the reason why Bungie doesn't really fit, because Bungie starts a free to play game, Destiny 2, and it's only one IP. Like
Yeah.
when Microsoft bought Activision Blizzard, they didn't just buy Call of Duty and then Bungie's games and King's games. They also bought every game they've ever made in 30 years of history. So they've got a huge catalogue of titles. They can theoretically put all into Game Pass. Sony may want to make moves in this space. They are a little bit more reluctant because they are concerned of the impact the subscriptions business model will have on the sort of games they make, those sort of single player blockbuster games that don't have a lot of monetization in them, that don't do microtransactions. Unless you can hit hundreds and hundreds of millions of players in subscription service, there is concern about, and that's what Microsoft wants to do. There is a concern that may devalue games. There is a concern around that. But at the same time, it may be the direction of travel. You can't resist. If you couldn't resist Netflix, you've kind of got to go with it. So they may have to do it, but they don't have to go all in. Like you talked about smaller games. You're right. Disney Plus, as an example, has loads and loads of original content in there, but you still go to the cinema to watch the big Disney movies, and that's something that PlayStation could perhaps try. I'm speculating, but it feels like something that's more suitable for them, where maybe you'll get the God of War DLC in the subscription service. Maybe you'll get some of the smaller games, like a Sackboy game or something. But you'll still have to go and buy those the Horizons and the Spider-Man separately. But we will. I'll be interested to see what move they make. I know that they'll be doing it. I'll be watching very carefully.
Do you think we risk these platform holders getting slightly overstuffed to the point where, say, if Phil Spencer is overseeing so many different games, he's stretched pretty thin. If Jim Ryan's overseeing so many different games, do you think there's potential for more people that are internal at these companies to start breaking off and starting their new studios? Because it seems that there is capital to start new studios everywhere because games are so valuable at the minute.
Well, I mean, I mentioned earlier Haven Studios, Deviation Games, and Firewalk Studios. They are made by former staff of Google, Ubisoft, Activision, Bungie, and actually one of them's the former Call of Duty developers. So it is this, you're seeing that already. So these people are being acquired, businesses are getting bigger, people are leaving, starting up their own studios. You're seeing that phenomenon. There's a few. Sony's acquisitions are more structured. They're buying studios they already worked with. They're not quite so drastic a lot of the time, but Bungie's obviously a bit more significant, but they're keeping them independent and separate. The thing with the Activision Blizzard acquisition is so massive. It's basically Microsoft have gone and bought a games company that's bigger and in some cases better than they are at some of the things. And when you think about that, when you think about how good Activision Blizzard is at launching games, there's lots of things they're bad at. We know what they are. But when it comes to launching games, marketing games, selling games, when it comes to monetization and live service, managing multi-studio projects, all these sort of things, Activision Blizzard are better at Microsoft at that. And when you think about, well, when you're starting to run a games business, how many of those Activision Blizzard people are you going to start putting in more significant roles at your studios? I think Activision Blizzard is so big, such a significant buy, that I think it will potentially change Xbox forever at some point. But it's hard to imagine. I can't even begin to think of the impact that's going to have on Xbox. You talked about managing all these different things. Bethesda's one thing. They're not that dissimilar to what Microsoft was doing in the first place. But Activision Blizzard, it's PC in a way that Microsoft hasn't been for a while. I mean, they do have a PC division, obviously, but it's not as big. In Blizzard, and then you've got Call of Duty, and then you've got King. It's just that's going to take a lot of working out. But I feel that PlayStation's sort of expansion, it's worth another thing to consider here. Is a lot of the times PlayStation may be buying studios to stop other people buying them. So they work with a lot of these studios. They were probably perfectly happy keeping them independent, but doing that risks them being bought up by a Microsoft or an Embracer or whatever. And so by buying them, they keep it in-house. It was the reason why Nintendo bought the Luigi's Mansion 3 developer, Next Level Games. They bought them because Next Level Games wanted to be sold. And if Nintendo wanted to keep them making Luigi's Mansion or whatever games they want to make, Nintendo had to put some money down to keep hold of them. And that's another thing that's sort of going on in this world of industry consolidation.
Do you get the impression that PlayStation will stay somewhat hands off with Bungie. It's not like they've purchased Bungie and renamed them to be Sony Washington. I think that's where Bungie are based. So
Yeah.
how do you get the impression that they're just going to let them do what they do best and not interfere too much? It's not like they're instantly stripping the team and getting them to start on a new Killzone live service game.
If Bungie wants to work on a Killzone, I'm sure Sony will say yes. But yeah, it will be. It won't be. It will be a hands off. They're being kept independent. They have their own management team. What we'll see, actually, Microsoft's having a very similar practice called it's called limited integration, where companies basically stay the way they are because you don't want to break the company. You don't want to integrate them too much and then upset all the staff and lose all the staff and then break what's we've seen studios go down that path many times. This has really started with Mojang at Minecraft, where Microsoft bought them and just let them stay as they are and just said, "Hey, anything you need from us, you let us know." And then Mojang said, "Oh, we want to do stuff with education," and Microsoft said, "Well, we've got some people who can help you with that." And that's how it will work. And it will happen. If Bungie wants to make a Killzone game, I'm sure Sony would jump at the chance. If Bungie want to make movies and TV shows, they can ask for that sort of stuff and look into those sort of things. It is a. I think it's notable that the wider Sony head was quoted in the press release. It's that's the way it'll work. And then what will happen the other way is when PlayStation builds up its own live service publishing capabilities, it'll be looking at Bungie and learning how to do that so that it can get there really quickly and not have to because Bungie's gone through a lot of pain getting to the point where it's got to now. It's made lots of mistakes in the online service world. Most companies that have got to this point have, and it's learnt the hard way from Halo to Destiny, going from premium box products with Xbox Live and launching that all the way up to free to play and live service console games. It's learnt it the hard way, and it's going to be really useful for PlayStation. But they're going to, Bungie's going to make its games for whatever it wants to do, and it's going to make whatever it wants, and it's going to just keep doing that and then utilize PlayStation for the stuff that PlayStation can offer them.
Do you think this accelerates conversation to where Jim Ryan just sends a message and says Destiny 3 ? So that they have something, they have a big launch? Because obviously when these new expansions happen, obviously there's one in a couple of weeks, a lot of eyes go back on Destiny, but it's not quite as much as if they could get on stage and show a Destiny 3. What do you think about that prospect? Because it's been quite a while since 2 at this point, a couple of years at least.
Well, yeah, and they're 900 staff development team, right? So they're not a small company. I understand they're working on a couple of projects. But I could well be Destiny 3. But the thing is with it's weird, isn't it? You wouldn't say there should be a GTA Online 2 at the moment, and I think it depends if they feel the game has gone as far as it can. RuneScape is a huge online service game. It's radically different to the one that launched back in 2000 whenever it launched, but it's still the same. They built on it rather than that. So I mean, I don't actually play. I haven't played Destiny for a long time, so I can't give you a much of an opinion on whether or not it needs to be a Destiny 3. But actually, I think this is the opposite to what Sony bought Bungie for. Sony know how to launch big blockbuster things. That's what they're good at. And what they need Bungie to do is to teach them how to maintain and look after games over years and decades. And so yeah, there may be a Destiny 3. I'm sure it's something that they've been talked about, but I wouldn't be surprised either if Destiny 2 is the sort of base thing that gets built upon over for years to come.
Obviously purely speculation at this point, but it feels like Bungie wouldn't mind perhaps leveraging some of that PlayStation expertise in the big £70 game to make like a really single player focused first person shooter like the original Halo trilogy, like something really focused like that, but without the kind of constant churn of having to do new content all the time. Because as you say, a team that big is not just working on Destiny 2 expansions. And as the kind of generation goes on, it'll be interesting to see when they do a technology refresh, because obviously at some point the engine starts to feel old. You see this with Fortnite moving to the new Unreal Engine but staying in the same client. I wonder if it just at some point it just becomes Destiny and the 2 is dropped.
I think the 2 is a bit.
They would go.
I think the moment they sort of did Destiny 2 and sort of tried to move everyone across, I think in reflection that probably wasn't that's what something you learn. I'm sure they learned from. But they might want to do a single player game, and I'm sure Herman Hulst and the PlayStation Studios team will be delighted to take that and publish it for them. And I said, but it will be on Bungie. It'll be what they want to do. What they're good at, though, are these big multiplayer sort of online social experiences. So I wouldn't necessarily. I don't think that'll be their direction. I don't think it will, but that doesn't mean they won't want to try something new or do something different. A bit like Obsidian doing things like Grounded, which is very different to all the other games they made. You might see something like that. They are a big team, and people will want to try new stuff. But yeah, I don't think. I think Bungie, this is what they do, and I think that would be there.
So obviously, Bungie fills kind of the first-person shooter hole in the Sony first-party story. They have their action-adventure games. They have the family games. They have studios like Housemarque and Bluepoint as well. Where do you think Sony goes next to kind of completely round out their studio space? Is it more sports games? Obviously, they have MLB The Show, but that's not even really theirs in the way it once was.
It's difficult because they do have quite a varied lineup. They have, racing games as well, and they've got multiplayer game. And the big thing for them, I think, is multiplayer at the minute. And I'm sure they are looking for more varied games to sort of boost up its catalog. I think for PlayStation, it's probably going to be more about platform expansion. It's going to be like mobile, maybe a bit more in that space, and a bit more in PC. But a lot of that's involving porting its PlayStation games. You mentioned sports. They have done, PlayStation was big in sports once upon a time. They sort of backed out of that quite a bit. One of the things about PlayStation is that they are first party, they are a platform holder. So they often don't always feel the need to make games in genres where its third party partners are active. While they've got EA as a big partner, they perhaps feel less pressure to make a football game, for instance. But there are, it'll be interesting to see if they react to some of the people that, Activision. You mentioned the fact that the Destiny plugs a shooter hole. Well, it doesn't really, because if Call of Duty does come off PlayStation, which I don't think it will, but if it does come off PlayStation, Destiny isn't necessarily a replacement for that. It's not like for like. So they might, invest in a shooter. They have invested in the shooter. They invested in the ones from Deviation and Firewall. So yeah, I think. I'm not quite. I don't really know the answer to the question. Is the answer? They probably don't have a list of genres. I think for them it'll be more about markets and territories. But I think live service is the thing. You're going to see a lot more social games from them, which is not something they've been doing. They've spent much time doing in recent years. And VR obviously is another big investment from them. So I think they've got their hands full before we start thinking about whether or not they're going to take on Madden. But but I'm sure if the opportunities come up, Herman Hulst is out there talking to everybody all the time, and we may see that. We may see some new things that might surprise us. This year, it's only been a month into the year, and it's already been one of the most surprising years of video games. And I dread to think what the next 11 months are going to bring.
Well, the next time Jim Ryan sends you a text and tells you it's about to go down, we'll be sure to get you back on for all the analysis. Where can people go and read the full interview with Jim?
So Jim Ryan and Pete Parsons' interview is on GamesIndustry.biz right now. So do give it a read. The site did break when it went up. Lots of people were trying to read it at the same time, but we fixed it quite quickly, so it's all fine now. So please do give it a read.
At least that's a good test case for you guys getting maybe some more back-end servers, just being like, this is going to keep happening. This is a year of acquisitions, and we need more power.
We're part of the same family as Eurogamer and Nintendo Life and all these sort of, like, we've got the tech, just they just needed to turn up the dial on us a little bit, more than they had expected to anyway. But yeah, it's not we're not a site that sort of normally is about traffic, because we're a business site, and it's often about making sure we're talking to games industry people. That's our audience, and that's obviously a smaller audience than the whole world. But every now and again, something like this happens, and we need to brace.
Well, I mean, if you're not interested in breaking those kind of stories, you can send it our way. We would happily have taken that story if you're just not if you're not keen on it.
With that one, maybe not. But I think Andy will tell you there's been a couple of times down the years where I've passed on something and it's ended in his lap.
We will definitely get you back on as the weird business of video games continues to just feel like kind of fantasy football at this point. There's no point predicting it because it's going to be infinitely weirder than you actually think.
It was notable that it happened on transfer deadline day. I think that was the.
Did you have a yellow tie?
It happened last year. Like it did. Yeah. Well, it happened a little bit last year because EA bought Codemasters, and there was some big moves happened last January as well. It seems to be the month for it, but I'll be interested to see what the next one is, and it's exciting. I'm a little worried what it all means, but it certainly keeps us busy.
There will be excellent books written in about 15 years' time about exactly how all of this went down. Yeah. But until then, until Nintendo buys both of our sites, and then we just come on here and praise them, like Activision trying to buy Kotaku. You can read more from Chris over at GamesIndustry.biz. You can read more from us at VGC. Until then, from me, Jordan, it is goodbye. From Chris,
see you later.
And we'll see you next time.